You all hear me? Good? All right. We didn't test the mic. I trust these guys. It's all set up. So, good morning. Oh, my. I have to really be on my best behavior now. My first boss in Columbus just showed up. And someone who, when I was asked to do this, I was so honored. I first of all was somewhat intimidated. I know a number of people who have participated in this leadership hour, and one of them is someone I consider a mentor and someone I really, really respect. Bill Loda was the chairman of the Airport Authority Board when I was recruited to come to Columbus in 2000. Other people that maybe you've heard, Dwight Smith is currently on our board. Jim Kunk, Marcia Ryan, people who are friends of mine, and they're just, I respect and admire them so much so that when I thought, oh my, I'm going to be doing what they did, I was very, very honored. First of all, choosing a topic I found to be one of the hardest things because I don't think there's anything new probably that can be said about leadership that hasn't already been said. It's people's personal philosophy and how they approach it in their style. So I just started thinking about what I kind of aspire to be, and I hope that's a servant leader. And I started thinking about something that we are very focused on right now at the Airport Authority, and that's engagement. And I also spent a little bit of time thinking about that word engagement. I don't know about all of you, but 15 years, 20 years ago, I don't remember engagement being the buzzword it is today. We would talk about a motivated workforce, a productive workforce. We'd talk about synergies, focus. I just never remember engagement being the buzzword it is today. I don't know about the rest of you. And so, let's see if this works. So first of all, why do we care about engagement? And you hear a lot about that today. And it is a driver of a number of business outcomes. You know, many of us have heard of Gallup, and there's all kinds of methodologies out there for testing and measuring engagement. We just completed a survey at the Airport Authority. We're doing it every other year. And some of the main outcomes, if you have a really highly engaged team, would be productivity. Profitability usually follows that. You have higher satisfaction of your customer group. You can attract and then retain talent more easily if you have a very highly engaged team. And so these are things, in fact, the methodology we're using as a local company, you may have heard of Right Management. They have 8 key questions. And it's a very, very high standard. If you don't answer agree or strongly agree with all 8 categories, you are not fully engaged. Some of them are measuring engagement of you personally, and then others with the organization. You're proud of where you work, you're committed, you'd recommend it to others. So I think we can all agree that at least engagement is really important. And we hear a lot these days about the younger generations coming into the workforce. I'm a baby boomer, obviously, by my gray hair. And, you know, different values possibly, or, you know, how they engage, how they want to be treated, how they want to interact. For them, I believe servant leadership is something that really can help engage them even further. And so, you know, how does this help increase engagement? And I just have a few slides, so you don't have to worry. I'm not going to give you 20 PowerPoint slides here, and I do want us to have an informal conversation in a few minutes. You know, I think servant leadership, first of all, is misunderstood. I've used this term sometimes, even in my own team, and I've seen some people cringe, and they think it's an inverted pyramid, and that means the leader's given up all their control, all their power, their decision making. And to me, that's not what it is at all. You know, the leader still has an important responsibility to set a vision, to set the direction that your company, your organization is going in. But for me, it is about being approachable, being down to earth, authentic, allowing employees to bring you solutions. And you know, you've heard the expression, the buck stops here. Well, the buck does stop in terms of somebody ultimately has to call it and make a decision. But I think some of my team who are actually in the room will tell you that if you bring me a problem, I'm going to say, what are your options? Have you thought about this? What are some solutions? I don't want you just bringing me a problem because I'm the boss to solve it. I think servant leaders encourage new ideas. One of the things we heard in our engagement survey still continues to be a challenge for us, as people sometimes say they don't feel that their opinions count. And that's really the heart of engagement. It's sometimes feeling that, well, you've already made up your mind. You may be asking me what I think about it, but your decision's already been made. That's not the same as really asking me for my opinion and asking me for some suggestions or new ways of doing things. Probably this next bullet is the most important as I'm describing it to other people. A servant leader makes sure their team can be successful. They provide the resources, whether it's more staff, whether it's budgetary, whether it's equipment, whatever it might be. It's making sure your team has the appropriate resources so they can be successful, and then you can help celebrate that success. And finally, you build strong teams. I think servant leaders are not afraid to hire people smarter than themselves. And certainly I have a lot of really smart people around me, and often, I get sometimes as the head of an organization, I'm the one who gets singled out for the credit. To me, it's always about we and not I. Our team is what's successful, and to me, that's where the servant leadership piece comes in. When I first heard about servant leadership, I was going through a program like Leadership Columbus when I started my airport career in Indianapolis, a long, long time ago, over 30 years ago. And Robert Greenleaf, I believe, is the founder of servant leadership and was from Indiana, and we studied that a lot in our leadership classes. And I really aspired when I heard about servant leadership. I said, that's what I want to be. And when people today, if I'm in a social setting, meeting people for the first time, people always like to say, well, what do you do? What's your job? My answer is almost always, I work at the airport. That's my answer. People look at me like, and sometimes that's all they want to hear when we go on and have a conversation, because I don't want it to be about my title. I don't want it to be about what my position per se. It is about working at the airport. It's about doing something that I consider community service that's very exciting and a very passionate career for me. To me, it truly is an honor to be selected and chosen to lead. I never dreamed about going into airports as a career path. If you ask me, what attracted me to this style, this leadership style, I would say it's because I did, like many of you probably, want to make a difference, wanted to give back, wanted to feel like I was doing something that would leave society better when I was gone. And so, it wasn't about title, it wasn't about authority or power or even the money. I think Bill will be amused by this. My entire career, I've never asked for a raise. And that's not to say I didn't think I deserved one. I just never asked for one because it was never about the money. I always enjoyed what I was doing. I always felt like if I worked hard, if I earned respect, if I was accomplished and successful, I would be appropriately compensated. And for the most part, I have been very, very blessed. My career path kind of followed a zigzag journey, and I've spoken to Dr. Crandall's freshman group of women, and one of the pieces of advice I give young people, whether they're female or not, is you don't have to know exactly what you want to be day one when you go to college. I know I've got nephews that are still struggling with, they got their college degrees in engineering and they still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And you don't have to know all the answers day one. If you look at my career path, first of all, I started out of college in social work. I was a caseworker in the welfare department. And I thought that's what I wanted to be, and I actually started graduate school in social work. And I'm not sure why, but I woke up one day and I thought, boy, this is a career path where I could really burn out very quickly, by the time I'm 30, because I was doing home visits. I was going and seeing people in very difficult situations, very poor conditions, raising a lot of children, and it was very challenging. And I thought, wow, I can't separate those problems that I'm helping every day. I was taking it home with me at night, is the simplest way to say that. And so I said, I don't think I could do this 30 or 40 years. So I changed paths. I taught school for a year. I taught math to, frankly, juvenile delinquents kicked out of the public school system. It was their last chance before they were institutionalized. Then I went to graduate school, was very drawn toward long-range planning, city planning, urban planning, community development, and I followed that career path to Memphis, Tennessee. I got my master's degree in community development and city planning. Went to work for the Community Development Block Grant Program in Memphis, in inner city, a couple of neighborhoods. So again, I'm still kind of following that community service, feeling, and love the planning aspect. I also had another, I guess, interesting piece that this will be amusing to some of you, but I aspired to be the first woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, to do that, I had to have a law degree, so I went to law school. I got my law degree. But I always had this strong feeling of, pull toward justice, and, that's where the social justice, as well as legal justice. And so, although I never made it to the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor beat me there, nor was I ever a judge, the law degree has come in very, very handy. So from there, I followed that path to being a staff attorney at the State of Indiana Transportation Office. Now you're starting to see a theme of transportation. I knew anything about that even people ran airports. It just had never crossed my mind that that was something that people might do for a living. I grew up in a fairly modest, probably lower middle class family. Went to public schools. Never flew on an airplane until after I was out of college. Didn't know people ran airports. Didn't know anything about aviation. And again, probably my favorite word in the English language is serendipity. And to me, that described how I got into airports. I'm always asked that question, and it's this zigzag journey. And my first airport job, I was age 30. And I'd done all these other things in the meantime. And so all of it came together, I think, nicely to give me the package of how I approach my current position and leadership. But to me, being able to give back to the community and contribute to the airports are very much a large economic engine and generate a lot of jobs here in Central Ohio. Let me step back just briefly, talking about engagement again. The communication is a word that we all use all the time, and the consultants that we're using for the engagement surveys at the airport said that there's not a single survey out there, whether it's a climate survey, an employee satisfaction survey, an engagement survey, that you won't find some kind of probably area of improvement being around communication. You just can't ever probably communicate too much. I know we work really, really hard at it at the airport, trying to, we've looked at all kinds of different tools. A number of years ago, our very first survey came back and said communication was an issue. We're a 24/7 operation. So we have employees working 3 shifts. We're physically in 2 locations. We have a number of people at Rickenbacker and the majority up at John Glenn. But we're spread out physically. Our offices are all over the place, and it really, really is hard to just walk down the hall and talk to somebody because we're all over the place. And so we've added a number of things. I started formally doing president chats twice a year. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 15 or 16 meetings at all the shift times. Some of them are late at night, some are early morning, some are at Rickenbacker. They're an hour to an hour and a half apiece. And I do that twice a year, and not only to communicate some of the key priorities and things we're doing, but also to ask for, answer questions and to see what employees want to hear about. We started also every other Monday morning an electronic update newsletter, top 3 or 4 things. We were frequently getting criticism because people were reading about things in the paper before they heard about it from us. And that's really a hard one to stay ahead of. And so we were putting out just kind of bullet, high level, these are things we think people would be interested in knowing about. We call those CRAA Today. We have expanded our newsletter to be a lot bigger and more focused on employees, a lot more photos, birthdays, onboarding dates, promotional dates, things like that that are well received by our employees. Probably the most important thing, though, is what I hear a lot is, don't just tell us about what we're doing or give us updates on projects. Tell us why. Explain the why of decisions. And that's one we continue to work on. And it's a fairly deep organization. It's spread out, but we, from frontline supervisors all the way up to my level position, it's something that we're trying to encourage everybody to make sure when you're talking about it, you explain the why and be able to understand the why. And so that's something the senior team is really spending a lot more effort on. One of the most important things is this aligning everyone to the vision. The leader's job is to set forth your vision and the direction that you're going. When I came to the Airport Authority, we had a strategic business plan, 45, 50 pages document. And I remember, and one of my direct reports is in the room, I think you'll remember this, I asked the question, so how many of you have read the strategic business plan? Every hand went up. How many of you have read it in the last 2 years? I don't think any hand went up. It had been put on the shelf. I mean, you did a plan and that was it, and there it goes. Because it was this big old thick document. So about 6, 7 years ago, we took a look really hard at that business plan. We said, this thing is very outdated, number one. We had gone through the merger with Rickenbacker, changed a lot of our business model very drastically, and it was 2 cultures coming together, changed a lot of our priorities. It's a cargo military joint use airport. It does have a little bit of passenger service with Allegiant. And so we, how many of you have heard of a balanced scorecard? Pretty common nowadays. So we decided to take the approach that our strategic business plan, I should have brought one, it is now 8 pages, and it's a brochure. And we have a little pocket size that we give every employee when they're hired. And so you'll see some of our employees carrying this around with them. They'll have a hole punched and they'll carry it on their lanyard. But it's centered around 4 key pillars, which is the balanced scorecard approach. You'll have people, process and technology, financial strength, and then customer. And in our case, we call it customer and community because we're a public entity. And your focus on people and processes and your technologies, if you're successful in those 2 areas, you should be driving very strong financial results and having outstanding customer experiences. So it's much easier to just look at it and to align. Our vision is to connect Ohio to the world. It used to be connect Central Ohio to the world until our former mayor said, this is Ohio's airport. This is not Columbus's airport. You need to think bigger, bolder. So we did. We dropped the Central out of our thing. We said, we're connecting Ohio to the world. We're in the middle of the state. We're in a great location to attract people to our airports. And it's not just people, but it's cargo, it's goods. And truly, we are connecting to the global economy. So that different approach to the business plan, I think, has been very, very positive. In the recent engagement survey, one of the things that scored the highest, well over 80, I think almost 85%, was the positive response to questions around our customer focus and our vision and where the organization is going. People understand the vision, they understand what we're trying to do and our mission statements. We have a balanced scorecard with key performance indicators that are metrics that's put up on large color boards, quarterly updated. We encourage all of our management team to discuss those at with their staff meetings so that we can try to make sure every employee understands how they contribute to the organization's success. And then we also have a strategic priority dashboard where each year we identify, usually about 3 key priorities that are, I kind of call them critical success factors. If we don't invest our time and our effort and focus on those things, then we aren't probably going to be successful for the long haul. So I'm going to summarize with some of my lessons learned, and I really want to open up dialogue. I want to hear from you and your questions, anything I can answer, but also just to share some conversation with you. So some of my lessons over the years, I would say, don't let your title influence how you treat people. I can't emphasize that enough. Some of the feedback we get, I've witnessed people who, as they get promoted, the higher up they go in an organization, they think their job now is to tell people what to do and to dictate to them. And that's, to me, not being a servant leader at all. There's respect that goes with the title, but back to some of the characteristics of servant leadership. I prefer people not know what my title is. I prefer to be able to walk around and talk to employees whenever I see them and wherever they may be located. I think being authentic and showing that you care is one of the most important things for your success. Work hard. It may be a given, but I think, and I don't want to offend anybody, but I do think most women have had to work twice as hard as men to get where they are. And hopefully that's changing, but that still seems to be a little bit of the reality, and if you want to call it breaking a glass ceiling. Being approachable, being down to earth, being able to talk to anyone in your organization regardless of what they do. One of the things growing up, I remember clearly in my teens was thinking, man, it would be really, really neat if I could do everybody's job at least once, even if it was for a day. And I thought, the reason I thought that is I thought I would understand how they feel, how they approach their work, and that was something I just thought was always, would be pretty neat. I understood realistically it was not practical, but by the time I was 30 and got into airport management, I counted once, I had over 20 jobs. And I counted everything. I mean, the babysitting, I've waited tables, I've been a dorm counselor in the dorm, I've been a teacher, I've been a social worker, I've been a city planner, I've been a lawyer, I've done a number of things, and every single one of those added to the total experiences I've had, and I still wish I could do a whole lot more. I've worked at 3 airports, and so kind of, that's not 3 different jobs, but every single one is very, very different. Started in Indianapolis, I went to the East Coast, that was really life-changing culture-wise, and then I was recruited to come to Columbus. So anyway, I can get off on too many stories if I go down that path. Continuous learning, focusing on best practices. We have a wonderful industry of people in airport management, airport executives groups, and I truly enjoy meeting with my counterparts. About 8 or 9 years ago, I started a group, I was just really curious how many women really were running airports. And so I just took a look at the top 100 a directory, and I found about a dozen of us. And so I started a group called Executive Women in Airports, and it's just an ad hoc, informal group. Well, today we've added some number twos, and we're up to almost 60. Some airports that would surprise you. Some of the biggest airports in the world, or at least U.S., Chicago, L.A., Denver, are all run by women. A woman used to run the Port Authority New York, the New Jersey Aviation Department, LaGuardia, Kennedy, Newark. Unfortunately, we lost her about 3 months ago to cancer. But it's a great industry, and my whole point there is just that it's a group that we support each other. We can pick up the phone, we can send an email and say, I'm working on this and this. Have you all had any experience with that? And literally within 24 hours, we'll have 24 responses with information. And I think that kind of networking is out there in a lot of industries. But the fact that the point is focusing on always getting better, not being satisfied with your successes. Don't rest on your laurels. There's always something to be learned. And things are changing so fast today in our world that my biggest challenge is finding time to read all the books I want to read. I love bookstores. Every time I walk in one, even though I have the Kindle and the tablets and I have a lot of electronic books, I still love to go into bookstores. I come home with a stack. And unfortunately, I haven't read them all, so someday maybe when I'm not working, I'll get to sit down and read all the books. And this last point, I've said this often, you can be pretty darn successful if you don't worry too much about who gets the credit. Now, how many of you have heard of the book Lean In? How many of you have read it? This might be a counterpoint in a way to, the book Lean In talks about, especially focused on women, work-life balance, and don't sit at the back of the room and let the men be up around the table. Lean in and have yourself be heard. And sometimes we don't pat ourselves on the back enough or speak up and, if you will, brag on ourselves a little bit. I think it's harder for women to do that than men. At the same time, you don't want to go to the other extreme. So there's making sure that your boss and people you work with know your skills, know your talents, get respect. You earn their respect by working hard, by your style, the way you do business. But if it's always about you, or you're taking somebody else's credit for something they did or their idea, or you're taking credit for the team, to me, I think that works against your success. Now, one of the things that, and I say this because I have a board of directors that's my boss. So even though I'm the CEO, I still have a board, and I'm in somewhat of a political environment. So whether it's the mayor who appoints half my board or the county commissioners who appoints half the board, anytime we do an event, I always want to make sure my board chair gets the first opportunity to be there to be the presenter, or to, the political folks doing the ribbon cuttings, and make sure that they're the ones front and center and get the credit. Those are kind of some of the lessons I've learned. I've been extremely fortunate in my career. I feel very blessed to be doing something I'm passionate about, that I love doing, that I feel like is contributing to this community in a very positive way. I have a great team. I've worked really hard to grow that team. We've added some key people in recent years, and the team's even stronger than what I inherited. And to me, that we're now focused heavily on the bench strength behind that team. It's a mature team. Rod and I can. Rod's been at the airport over 20 years, is our chief operating officer, and I've been there going on 16 years. We had a recent meeting with one of the bond rating agencies, and we showed the org chart. And the top 7 people in our organization have over 200 years of airport experience. So it was pretty impressive, but it's also scary because we're not going to be there forever. So we've got to start looking at that bench. And we're starting to focus heavily on the succession planning. There's a number of things. Certainly, I do a lot of public speaking. It's more around what's going on at the airports. I brought a brochure, and I'm happy to talk about it. I didn't hand them out because I didn't want you all reading them, but this is our new terminal. You think, what? We're growing very fast. The last 2 years, we're up 15% in passenger traffic at John Glenn. I'm still having a hard time saying John Glenn has, instead of Port Columbus, but we're already planning because Dr. Crindle was talking about long-range planning. She gave me the credit for 50 years. Airports have 20-year master plans, every airport that gets federal dollars. And we're growing so fast, and even if we slow down, we're forecasting we might need a new terminal in the next 9 or 10 years. And we started last year, and this is one of our strategic priorities. We said we have to start looking at how would you execute a program that could cost $1.5 billion. New terminal, new parking garage, new roads, new car rental facilities. How would you pull that off? Because we don't have all the internal capabilities of doing something that size. And so that's what we're focused on right now. We've put together a lot of internal teams, a communication team, a finance team, a steering committee, and we're just starting to really, this is a part of our communication effort, to go out in the community and start talking about what's coming, because we just spent $80 million. We just renovated the current terminal, and as soon as we were finishing that up, we were talking about a new facility and a new program, and it was a little confusing on the timing. People are saying, well, why are you doing that? Because it will take a long time, and we better be prepared. And we may build things in phases. So we're starting a car rental facility, the design later this year, and we'll have construction starting in early 2018 and completed in early 2020. So less than 4 years from now, we'll have built the biggest facility on the airport in terms of about $150 million investment. That's mostly because our parking garage is getting full 2 or 3 times a week. The full sign goes up, and we need to make sure we have room for our local customers to park, and so we're going to move the car rentals out of the first 2 floors, and they'll be in a new garage facility over by past the McDonald's, still right in the middle of the airport. The new terminal will be right next to the control tower. So as you're coming in International Gateway, it'll be on your right. Parking garage, car rental facility will be on your left, connected by a sky bridge, right there centrally located. The roads that you may think, why do we have that one-way loop road system? We built that a number of years ago when the interchange was built because we knew the terminal was coming. So we looked down the road and said, do it now instead of tearing out a brand new road in 10 or 15 more years. So to me, I enjoy that a lot with my planning background, obviously. You'll see in what I just described, you'll see in the very middle of this brochure, a little bit of a layout of where everything will be located. And the picture is what it might look like. Obviously, an architect may design it and say, well, we don't like that look. So it's exciting to see that coming, and whether it's 10 years, 15, or 20, there's a lot of effort and a lot of work that goes into that. Let me stop. I'll leave you with some nice quotes there, and open it up for your questions, what I can talk about or anything you'd like to raise. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that we were walking through the airport, someone in our group made a comment that Columbus used to feel like a small town airport, and we were coming into Terminal B, which was completely overhauled, and that it feels like a big city airport now. So
I think that's a compliment.
it is. It really is.
Yeah, yeah.
It was exciting to walk through the area now that the construction has been completed, at least in that section, and to see what it really feels. It looks wonderful, and the ease of use and just walking through and the people and how it's configured.
Well, it's great to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Typically, sometimes we'll hear complaints and not all the compliments. But since the renovation was completed, we call it a modernization back in March. It's been 3 years of effort. We've received just tons of compliments like that. one of the things that was really important to us was to, and we partnered very closely with Experience Columbus, Columbus Partnership, Columbus 2020, to make sure that we could showcase this is the front door to our city when you land there. And so some of the things we worked hard on, some of the image, we call it kind of the Columbus image piece, the floor medallions. Next time you're there on the upper level, you'll see kind of an abstract graphic of a globe of the world. It's intended to tie back to our vision of connecting Ohio with the world. And then there's medallions all the way around that showcase some of the key landmarks in our community. There's the Ohio Stadium, there's the art arch, the art over at CCAD, State Capitol, a number of things like that. We've got a couple of hallways that we're focusing on art displays. There's some of our advertising program now that you'll see a one of us is intended to tell business travelers coming into our community. There's a lot of big companies located here with major employment or headquartered here. And so you'll see them throughout the building. They're advertising, but they're commonly branded one of us. We also gave the space in the jet bridges to Columbus 2020. And notice the next time you come in or out of in a plane, beautiful graphics and wall wraps showcasing things to do in our great city. So we're proud of all of that. I think designing a future new terminal will be a lot of fun as well with those kind of things as the starting point. But our terminal is broken into 3 concourses. It's all completed with one exception. We have one more project right now. We're working on the front, curb front. So we're replacing sidewalks, the vestibules. We're replacing all the front glass and the doors in the front of the terminal. We're adding more lighting to make it brighter when you come up in front of the building because it's connected with the garage. It's kind of dark. So that'll be finished by early next year. But one of the things that surprises a lot of people, it surprised me. I knew we had done a lot of things. We built a new runway about 4 years ago. The board, when I was hired, told me the number one priority was to get an interchange and get rid of those 3 traffic lights coming in International Gateway. Took a few years, but working with ODOT, getting some federal funds, we were able to get the 670 interchange. That wasn't there 15 years ago. You came in, but then you went down to Stelzer Road at grade. You had 3 lights. That's all gone. In the last 15 years, we have invested around $900 million in that airport. And that number surprised me. I could come up with 400 or 500 million in my head, but so when we think about a future program that could be anywhere from the 2014 estimate, 2014 estimate was 1.3 billion. We're currently doing a study. We're just getting started. It'll be about 12 months. A capacity study. We're looking at the current terminal in great, great detail. We're also looking at parking, the road in front of the terminal, baggage claim, checkpoints. What is the capacity of our current building? Because no one really knows the answer to that, and it's a hard question to answer. If you come out to the airport in the middle of the afternoon, it probably looks dead. If you come out there at 6 in the morning, oh my gosh, it's night and day, lines, and so it's all about peak hour. It's just like designing the churches for Easter Sunday, or our parking lots for spring break, or the terminal for 5 to 8 a.m. And so we believe total passengers is around 9 million is the capacity of our building. Maybe a little more. This year we're going to be at 7.3 roughly. We're up 8% this year. We were up almost 7% passenger growth last year. And even if it flattens out and goes down to 2% a year, we're going to hit that 9 million by the mid-2020s. So unless there's a major, pullback in the economy or a recession again, we could very easily be talking about new terminal 2025 to 2030 timeframe. Yes, sir.
So you have your own staff, you have all the
And, it's a great question, and it's a big challenge. I think 4 years ago we did an economic impact study, and I think there was about 6,500 people working at Port Columbus at the time, John Glenn, and would have made us about the 13th largest employer in the city. The airport authority only has a staff of around 400, but you're exactly right. It's kind of like we're a landlord. We negotiate and we have leases with the airlines, the food and beverage operators, the restaurants, the TSA. A lot of the airlines now have third-party vendors, companies that are contracted to handle the baggage coming on and off the planes. One of the complaints I hear, and to your point, is how long it takes to get your luggage. Well, side story, there's 2 reasons for that. Our terminal is so easy. You get off your plane, you're down at your bag claim in 5 minutes. There's no way they can unload a plane and get your luggage there that fast. Go to another airport. I just flew through Minneapolis on Sunday. Oh my gosh, it takes you forever because of how long their concourses are, and they have a lot of moving sidewalks. I missed a flight there a few years ago and had an hour connecting time and missed my flight. And so by the time you get to baggage claim in that airport, your luggage is already there waiting on you, so people don't think it's slow. So you kind of have to. I walked off the plane Sunday behind a guy, and he had his own carry-on bag, but he was already complaining about this airport is so slow with your luggage. I didn't stop him to have a conversation. It was after 10 o'clock Sunday night, and I thought, let him go. He can have his, But seriously, so there was a situation, and we do have some issues where the airlines don't have enough staff because they're cutting their cost, and if they have 2 or 3 flights come in at once, most of them have a 20-minute maximum wait. Now that sounds like a long time, and it is, but most of them are a lot faster than that. So to your question, we have a customer service group that with representatives from all of those different tenants, if you will, or partners. They come together quarterly. We do we do customer surveys that are done by a firm internationally with other airports, so we can compare ourselves to other airports, both in North America and around the world. And we share that data with our team quarterly. We go through it. We talk about, we get the written comments as well. We have a person that's a manager of customer service that leads that initiative. They meet then with the restaurant, food and beverage, airlines, and any comments we get about a specific company, we share that with them directly. If there's any complaints, whether it's TSA, we'll go straight to the top with TSA locally. But overall, our customer satisfaction ratings are around 4.4 on a 5-point scale, and we're very, very good. We focus a lot on it. One of the things that customers will say, it won't surprise you, probably the number 1 or number 2 most important thing is the cleanliness of your restrooms. Ben Stead here is our manager of our custodial team. We have our own custodial staff. They work really, really hard, and I would put our cleanliness up against any airport in the country. That's the first thing I check when I fly is I go in the women's the restroom, whether I need it or not, just to check it out. So, Christine. That was interesting. In fact, I mentioned Rod Bordner, our Chief Operating Officer. He was here, and he was actually running the airport because I was in Montreal out of the country. And what's interesting in hindsight was it was one of our 2 trade organizations, Airports Council International, was having its annual conference, and almost 80% of airport directors in the country were in Montreal on 9/11. Most people don't know that. So not only were we away out of town, well, we were out of the country, and Montreal's close, but they closed the border. A few people were able to drive across the border, get back to New England airports. I mean, remember what was hit, right? The Port Authority, the director of New York's airports was in Montreal. Boston was in Montreal. We were all in Montreal, and our teams were at home running the place. Rod, you want to just comment on what the experience was like? I know I've heard this, but you were there firsthand.
I guess the best word I could use to describe it would be surreal. It was one of those things that's very difficult to believe it's actually happening. Even though you're watching it on television and you have all this information coming at you because of the FAA and from law enforcement and other agencies and so forth, it's still, you're having to deal with it and react, and yet it's just almost an unbelievable situation. That's one of the things that may leave you with the best impression is in the middle of the afternoon that day, I sat down with the assistant manager of the air traffic control tower at Fort Columbus. We sat down together just to catch our breath. And he turned to me in that quiet moment and said, "We actually did it." And I looked at him a little curiously and he said, "We shut the system down. We really didn't know if our plan to do that would work because we had never had an opportunity to exercise it." And that's what everyone in the industry was dealing with. We got a lot of airplanes that weren't destined for Columbus initially, but the FAA said, "Land where you are, the closest airport," because we were dealing with lots of folks who didn't intend to come to Columbus. We had to figure out how to get them processed through the terminal, how to get them out of the terminal, and then put up in hotels and so forth. It was a very hectic day. And then you all will recall it took more than 3 days to get the system back up and running. That was an exercise in itself. We kept getting new requirements almost hourly from the FAA dealing with security, as you might imagine. And we were reacting to that and trying to put processes and procedures and things in place to get the system back up and running. It is very gratifying. We were ready to go when that FAA gave the word that they were ready to open the system. There were a number of airports who had not been able to do that. It was a very, very interesting, very surreal, very challenging, obviously very emotional time for everybody involved.
And then they dealt with me calling in every hour or two saying, "What's going on? What's going on?" So, I ended up finally being able to rent a car, which was a whole nother story because it was like somebody's wedding car and it was this big old thing and it was a crazy story. But I drove from Montreal to Columbus to get home because we didn't know when the flights, we kept thinking it's going to reopen. We're going to have a flight the next day. The crew for our airplane, they had the airplanes up there, but they couldn't get the crews there. So anyway, again, it was a great example of a great team, well-trained to handle any type of emergency. And it certainly was something that changed our industry because shortly after that was the standing up of the new agency, TSA. I've told this story. 3 major things changed since my time in Columbus that were never on the radar when I was hired. The first was certainly 9/11. That was about 9 months after I came to Columbus. And the TSA and security and everything now, how it affects our business. The second was Rickenbacker. I think I'd been here 3 months when one of the county commissioners went to then Mayor Coleman and said, we ought to talk about merging the 2 airports. So some of you may know Rickenbacker was run by a separate port authority. Franklin County appointed their board, and the city of Columbus appointed our board to run then Port Columbus and Bolton Field, the General Aviation Airport. After a year-long study, the conclusion was there were a lot of benefits for merging these 2 together. Not without challenge. The Rickenbacker board and some of the management team really didn't want to do that, and the recommendation was to put these 2 together. We're still dealing with some of the culture changes between and differences between the 2 organizations, but we've blended them into one team, and it's getting a lot better. And that airport last year was the most successful in its history. with about $1.5 million operating profit. When we took it over, it was losing $4 million a year. And so it's still got a long way to go because it's so capital intensive, these are, for investments. And the third major change was the merger with Rickenbacker occurred January of 2003. About 6 weeks later, we're still putting these two organizations together. I got a call from Bill. I don't know if you remember this, Bill. Bill called and said, "Do you know anything about America West closing their hub in Columbus?" I got a call from the media. And he and I were on our way, I think it was to Morpsey, to do a panel to speak together. And I said no. And so the CEO of America West Airlines, we had a small hub here, some of you may remember. We had 49 flights a day. It was 25% of all of our flights was America West. Their CEO was in Columbus to meet with his employees to tell them we're closing the hub, but we're going to keep 4 flights. Hadn't told me, hadn't told the mayor, hadn't told anybody they were doing this. And said, we're going to start cutting flights April, May, and June. By June, you'll be down to 4 flights a day from 49. So that was 6 weeks after the merger. So those things were not on the radar. You talk about having to be flexible and adapt to change, as well as it's great when you're growing and there's challenges with growth, but certainly that tested all of us. And within a short time, Delta and a couple other airlines started adding flights because this is a local strong market. We're not a connecting hub, and so it took us a couple of years to fully recover from that, but we've obviously done pretty well. So those were 3 big things we never could have anticipated. I had no idea we were going to get that when I came here.
You touched on this kind of in your vision, but a lot of us have seen the Insight 2050, which projects the growth of Columbus somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million people in the next 30, 35 years. How
Does that affect us?
Well,
Yeah.
of course it does.
Yeah.
How does it? Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think you touched on it.
Right. So one of the things about air service, it's interesting, everybody has their favorite place they want a nonstop flight to, and they'll say, why don't you have a flight to so-and-so? And it really, the airlines look at demand. They want to know how many people are going to get on that plane, and it's all about the bottom line. It's money. They're a private business as well. And so when we talk to the airlines, we obviously go in and we show them information. The data historically is nearly 6 months old, but we'll say, well, we have X number of people per day going to this city. So our number one market right now that we want a nonstop flight is Seattle. We have a little over 100 people a day each way going to Seattle, but we don't have a nonstop flight. That used to be the problem with San Francisco, and then last summer, Oakland was added by Southwest Airlines. LA was the challenge before that. So anything on the far west coast is a challenge because it takes so long, ties up a plane for the day, and they want to know that they're going to fill the plane and be able to charge pretty high fares. So the demand for air service comes from the population, the business community, the strength of the demand. And if the population continues to grow, that bodes well for the airport getting more flights because more people are going to be in the community wanting to fly. I was with William Murdoch yesterday from Morpsey, who was involved with that study. The congressional staffers were here yesterday for a fly-in to see some things going on in our city. And they originally thought it was going to be 500,000 growth projected for 2050. And they now are projecting that we'll grow from 2 million to 3 million by 2050. That's 34 years from now. That sounds like a long way off, but it'll be here before you know it. So, I mean, we've grown very, very fast to get to the 2 million. We're the fastest growing metro area in the whole Midwest. And the airlines pay attention to that. The rating agencies pay attention to that. All of the local demographics are really important to our business. If we have a recession, if traffic will slow as a result of that. But it definitely will drive the need for a terminal and future facilities faster. The one thought, I think it's answered in here in the Q&A, is if nothing else, if you leave today, know that your local airports are not supported with local tax dollars. We're self-sufficient from a standpoint of user fees. Our number one revenue is parking. We're concerned, thinking about what's going to happen with Uber and, autonomous cars, and there's a lot of technology impacts to our business as well. But parking, car rentals, food and beverage sales in the terminal, those are all some of our biggest revenue sources. It's tied directly to passengers. And a facility like this, we've been very, very low debt. We're going to be issuing a lot of revenue bonds for the future to pay for all this with backing from the airlines. But it's a little complicated, but a lot of people just assume that, we're a quasi-governmental public entity, but at the same time, we're self-sufficient in operating from user fees. So, thank you very much for, and I'll be happy to stick around. And,
I think it's fascinating,
there's-
especially I think you
yeah.
touched